All right, today we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth analysis on Gennady KVIKVINIA versus Devon LARRATT at East versus West. It's been 1 month since this match came out, so we're now able to do this. And I'm going to look at this round. This is round 5. I think this was the most interesting round in the match, and I think it told us a lot about kind of the flow of this match. So first we got the slip and straps, and we see Devon trying to take this very dominating high hook kind of grip, trying to maintain all of his fundamentals. We see Gennady immediately going for that flop press, but because of the grip Devon is taking, where he's cupping over the top, he has to bail out really low underneath. So that looks really good for Devon initially. But in straps, it might be a little bit different. So moving on to the strap round, we have a really interesting ready go here. I don't know if you guys noticed this when it happened live. It's a very strange interaction that happens here. So you see Devon with this really deep grip. And one thing that's happening in this match is Gennady can do really everything, but he has a really dangerous stylistic flop press in this match for Devon. So Devon is not setting up to try to top roll Gennady. Devon is not setting up in a way that would kind of prioritize his ability to crack Gennady's wrist back, but rather he's kind of banking on the fact that his pronation is so strong, he's really never going to have an issue when it comes to cracking Gennady's wrist back. So you can see Devon has a really deep grip here, and he's actually taking a grip that normally would make it even harder to pronate out and crack your opponent's wrist back. And he's doing that in order to block the flop press. Once you get wrist on wrist contact, as we can see here, and you can see that bottom kind of wrist knuckle right here on Devon is very far past Gennady. What this does is it makes it really difficult for Gennady to flop, because as he starts to flop, you'll see Gennady initiates with flop. But instead of dumping that wrist underneath and causing Devon to get over pronated, and giving Gennady access to Devon's bicep, what happens instead is that Gennady's wrist joint slams right into Devon's wrist joint. So if you guys don't know what I'm saying, instead of Gennady essentially slipping underneath like we saw in the slip, he just goes right into Devon's arm and Devon blocks it. That's because of that super deep grip that we saw from Devon. And then what's going to happen is Gennady feels that, but then he says, okay, well, Devon is so deep now, I can probably just go ahead and hook him. So then we see we see Gennady pushing past and getting a really, that's a pretty decent hook grip right there. Now Gennady has a lot of access to power. And normally this would not be the greatest position if you were a top roller. Gennady has a lot of access to chop down onto Devon's arm through that supination, through the kind of pinky pad part of his palm. If you're someone like Sasho Andreev, someone who's more of a traditional hook puller, you would be really happy in this situation. But the difference is that Devon's pronation is just so strong. Gennady still doesn't really have access right there. And you can see Gennady commits to that hook. He gets supinated in. Now he's wedging sideways, and he has a slight amount of bend in his wrist. And he's going against Devon's arm power. But even from this this is not a good position to roll out from Devon. But he's just still strong enough to do it. And he knew that going into it, which is why he was comfortable taking that super deep, super low grip. He essentially did a low grip top roll, which is only applicable if you're blocking a flop presser. That's pretty much the only use case I would think of, is if you're going up against someone who can flop press and you have enough pronation to top roll them, even if you're essentially starting in a hook. That would be kind of the use case for that, and that's exactly what we see here from Devon. Gennady is in a pretty good position here. He's just still unable to bend his wrist because Devon's pronation is so strong. And so then we're going to see this moment here in a second where Devon maybe actually goes a little bit too far, and it's interesting. Or no, sorry, that's going to be in round 2 actually, or the restart of this round. First we have this kind of phantom elbow foul that everyone talked about. But in the restart, we're going to see the same position, and Devon's maybe going to let out a little bit too much rope underneath. He's going to pronate a little bit too far. He's kind of already in the danger zone here and potentially giving Gennady access to a sort of Todd roll or a flat press move. But right here, we're going to have an elbow foul on Devon. Now, and Devon's obviously a little bit upset here. That's a great face. And this one caused a lot of drama, not only between Devon and Gennady, but of course the entire arm wrestling community. Looking at the replay here, this angle doesn't really tell us anything. This one right here gives us a little bit more, and it's hard because it doesn't seem like it's right when Devon moves his elbow up a little bit, and then it doesn't look like he moves, and then we can see right there where his elbow is. So to me, this is just a little bit subjective as to whether or not this is a foul, and it totally depends on the rule system. So if your rule system is that if any part of the elbow comes off the pad, then sure, I think this is probably a foul. It seems like part of Devon's elbow is floating, but I would say part of his elbow is also touching the pad. So I think it just depends. Is the rule system going to be as long as any part of the elbow is touching, or is it going to be if any part of it comes off? Is it just the very pointy tip of the elbow? So to me, this isn't necessarily a problem. It just depends on the rule set you want to use. I tend to gravitate more toward if any part of the elbow is touching, just makes it a little bit easier and a little bit simpler. And as long as it's any part of the elbow is touching or above the pad, you're probably not going to get a foul in most cases unless they actually fall off of the pad. And then it's going to be a lot easier to make that call. But either way, I think this is fine. Devon's still up. Now we have another really awkward start, but we basically end up right in the same position again. And Devon hits sideways and really does just kind of hook Gennady here. Now he's in that deep position and he begins to roll out. And now Devon has a lot of access to control Gennady's pronator. And if you guys have ever tried to flop without a pronator, it's really, really difficult in this position to try to do a supinated flop press. You just don't really have access to your opponent's bicep. And this is what I was talking about in this moment right here. We're going to begin to see Devon maybe go a little bit too far. He has good control over Gennady's pronator, but Gennady's going to start to do a little bit of a Todd roll and kind of slide underneath. And by sliding underneath and flopping his wrist back, he's going to open Devon a little bit. We see it right there. You guys see that move? He hits sideways, and then he does a little bit of a drag back. And even though Devon's bicep just got opened, and this is not normally the position you would attempt to press from, it's a little bit awkward. Devon can feel, he's getting those flashbacks from the last time he pulled Gennady, and he can feel that the flop press is potentially close. And you can even see Gennady kind of wedging his shoulder forward there. He's feeling it, and you can see that wrist flopping back just a little bit. It's there. Devon comes up to the top, and he wants to avoid that flop at all costs. He knows if the match goes hook, he can always pronate back out if he needs to, but he has to prevent Gennady from isolating his bicep with a flop wrist. So Devon just comes up and just completely supinates the match and hooks him. Then notice how Devon's hand kind of slides down on Gennady's wrist. So here's the position here. Comes up, hooks him. The hand kind of slides down a little bit lower onto Gennady's wrist. And now Devon can roll back out with a little bit more cupping control. And you can see it better from this angle right here. Devon now has a lot more control of Gennady's pronator, and he's lower on the wrist. He's blocking Gennady's wrist with his own wrist. So it's just going to be really difficult for Gennady from here to flop underneath Devon. He just doesn't really have access to that anymore because the depth of the grip has increased. He's doing a great job of controlling the thumb. And then right here, we see Devon make that really scary move. He comes forward. He's looking good here, but he still hasn't really sucked everything in and gotten his elbow tight yet. So he does a little surge, but it's not quite there yet. Then we're going to see him truly commit the shoulder now. Now he has control of everything in the hand, completely commits the shoulder. And once he gets that shoulder in, then pretty convincing, pretty easy press to the pad. So we see this kind of initial surge, bumping Gennady out of the shoulder once more, probably increasing his cup and his depth of grip a little bit. And then that final squeeze to the center of the table brings the shoulder a little bit forward, maybe tries to tuck the elbow in a little bit more, and then presses right to his corner. Beautiful press, shutting down every single available lane Gennady had. And I think this was a great performance from Devon LARRATT here. Now, there were moments in this match where it looked like Devon was just on a whole other level and completely destroyed him. But I think this last match showed that depending on the lane the match takes place in, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world for Devon. And there can be lanes where he can get a little bit nervous that Gennady has access to that flop, because it's not just a traditional match, because Gennady really can pull in any area and without his wrist. So I think that when Gennady tried to do certain things, it was extremely dominant for Devon and it looked super easy. But as Gennady became more committed to that flop press and more open to it from any lane, then I think that that's when this match got a little bit closer. So let me know what you guys think about this. I think I'm probably good on seeing this matchup for now. I know it's technically tied, but what I would like to see at some point in the future that seemed like it may happen, maybe in the next few years, is we could see this match again at 115 kilo. I think that would be a little bit more interesting because it would switch things up a little bit. And hopefully Gennady would be totally healed from any injuries at that point. So let me know what you guys think about this. I think it was a great performance from Devon, but maybe a little bit closer matchup than it appeared on the surface. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you later.